Alrighty, good evening and welcome to Nikos RPG. I'm Jonathan Albin, your host, and we are going to be talking about the reasons why I still roleplay. Now, full disclosure, I've said many times I'm a game master with more than 50 years behind the shield. That's an average of one game session a week for an entire 50 years. It's accommodating almost something like between 9 and 1,200 players throughout that period across a dozen states and in quite a few different cities. And today we're going to talk about what that looks like in terms of experience and why you would want to do so for such a long period of time. Most people pick up a hobby and piddle with it for 2, 3, 4 years. Some people spend their whole lifetime pursuing a hobby. But in this case, 50 years of storytelling really comes down to 50 years of stories. As a person who has always been a creature of an overactive imagination, it's been a great place for me to engage what I have in my head in a way that my players can pick up and engage with the very physical thoughts that I present. I say it that way because in being a storyteller, you have to create a level of realism that the players can engage with for it to be an active role-playing situation. I know many game masters who have at some point kind of lost the ball and have now become fundamentally either role players, ROLL, meaning that they depend only on dice rolls to determine the resolution of interaction and don't weigh very heavily the actual role playing aspect of their sessions. I know other game masters who have forsworn the concept of advancement entirely and play in the rather open field of general role play without having an experience basis or an advancing process. And in both cases, you end up sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater because you're not providing the very experience that role playing promises, and that is the idea of putting the player in the mindset and the locale of the scene and letting them determine the direction and the course of the story and providing them agency. And with a large stock of adventures that have been played through, there are certain of them that I have been able to, for example, play through more than one time because the players are so disconnected from the current scene that they are not aware of how much of it is actually being sort of repurposed or reprocessed. But the real element there is that the games, even if I used exactly the same data that created one adventure with another group, the outcome would be potentially radically different because the players themselves are a critical variable in your role play experience. So the first benefit is that you now have a very full dance card, so to speak, of stories to tell and ways to relate to the players so that they feel like they're part of your community and part of the world. And it's actually quite stunning when you have groups that such as those that I have, where you had one player completely play through an entire arc. 7 years to play every week with somebody is a pretty dedicated fan and dedicated individual, and so the outcome of that play experience therefore is very rich and rewarding. And so the 50 years also equates to, like I said, literally thousands of players who have sat at my table and enjoyed the output of the game, but also have submitted great input into the story building and the richness of the world of Nikos itself. Now, to be honest, the idea, therefore, of having that many players over that long of a time, you do have your share of what I call babysitting, and I'm not meaning to necessarily be a demeaning factor, but there are many people who desire the impact of a role playing game, but don't have or haven't yet developed the chops to actually make the decisions necessary for them to drive forward the story. And in those cases, as a storyteller, in order to promote and propagate the story flow, you fundamentally act as a babysitter. And I'm not saying that in a demeaning fashion, but what I'm referring to is that the players are able to see the pursuit of the adventure through the eyes of a protagonist, even if that means that the storyteller has to provide that output in terms of putting a non-player, non-engaged, not enjoying player into the group, who then takes that lead for them for a time until they get their sea legs, so to speak. And what's really fascinating, especially in the case like I currently have where I run games at a game store, generally speaking, every week or two I'll have two or three or even five or six new players sit down at the table who have never role played before. And it's almost like a training session, because you're teaching them how to role play, and to do so you sometimes have to lead them by the hand. And this does create a pretty tight relationship between yourself and the other players at the table, when they know they can depend on you to carry the weight in the given story when necessary, and yet know that you're going to release and provide that ability back to the persona and the characters when they're ready for it. As a game master with 50 years of continuous RPG experience, I can tell you that accounts for 50 years of conflict resolution. Sometimes the conflict is between the players and the villains, which is what the game is fundamentally designed for. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of impact of decision making that gets processed through that. But conflict resolution also can include the players interacting with each other, and you sometimes have to resolve those conflicts. I've had everything from individual personality problems between players all the way to players that again get involved with affairs and breaking up of relationships and tearing down of friendships, and all of that you really have to find a way to manage through, because as the in the theatric world would say, the show must go on. You have to continue to play even if the players are having challenges, and being able to recognize and resolve those conflicts so that they do not hinder the game sometimes is rather difficult, and so you may even end up with horrible situations where players have to be asked not to play in a session and the like, and that can be really problematic. So you definitely have to figure out ways to resolve those conflicts in a way that will provide more options in the future for all of the players to continue their enjoyment of the game, even if it means you change the conditions, the setup, and the personnel that are involved in the individual scenes. When you've told as many stories as I have over the last 50 years, it is really nice to know that the players are appreciative of the game sessions that you provide. Most games groups are gracious about it and will let you know that you've done a good job, that they've appreciated the games that you've been involved with. But it's also sometimes particularly interesting when the players realize how much effort you've put into the game and how much that they have depended upon what you are providing for their enjoyment. And if there's any one part of being a game master that I really have been underappreciative of, it is actually that of people who have supported what I've done so far. And so I want to thank everybody who's ever played at my table. And again, in in the case of those that have played in the previous iterations and the different time frames of Nikos, I invite you to come back and become a part of the games again, even if it's only at a partial basis, even if it's only through the roleplay roulette sessions that we do online and everything. But the idea is that I want to be able to reflect back to you how much I appreciate all of you for having been here during the sessions I've been a part of, and to thank you for giving me the time that you've been at my table. You can't stay a game master for very long if you can't keep players at your table. And so, by having this longevity of storytelling experience itself isn't necessarily something that's self-aggrandizing, because the idea is that if I was a poor storyteller, I wouldn't be able to keep doing it without having to feel like I'm starting over all the time. And the fact that I've got one player who's been with the world of Nikos for just at almost 2 full iterations at this point is very fulfilling. And by having as many as I have right now, which is 9 games groups operating each week, I'm just really glad to be able to provide a quality service and a dynamic story to so many. If you haven't yet watched any of the videos of the episodes that I've done in the past, do check out Nikos RPG here on YouTube, because it has a considerable number. I think it's like almost 800 videos at this point. So there's a lot of information that I'd be glad for you to share with and to be a part of. And we will be endeavoring in the next year or so to add even more interesting things. We do have, for example, on Tuesdays we will be having our story so far, a continuation of the campaigns of Nikos as they are occurring in the 9th iteration. And this will be also a very interesting time, because we are in the beginning stages of the first literal world war on the world of Nikos. And we honestly don't know where the story's going to go from here. So hope to have you join us on the Tuesdays for that information. We are here Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. each day. And we also are here on Friday mornings at 10 as well. And we will be endeavoring to add a live stream show fairly soon that hopefully will give you a better opportunity to actually see what role-playing in Nikos can look like. Alrighty, I want to thank you again for being here today, and hope to see you in the next episode. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this has been Nikos RPG.